The scent of betrayal is one you never forget. For Gabriella Blake, it smelled like expensive cologne and the cheap perfume of a woman who was supposed to be her friend. She was standing in the nursery. She had designed a room filled with dreams of a future, holding a positive pregnancy test, ready to share the most joyous news of her life. But the man she loved, her fiancé Vincent Drake, walked in, not with a ring, but with a confession that would shatter her world. He was leaving her for another woman, for a business merger. And he didn't know that as he walked out the door, he was leaving behind not just a woman, but his own unborn child. This is the story of how her deepest heartbreak became the catalyst for her greatest triumph as she rose from the ashes of his betrayal to become the bride of his most powerful and ruthless enemy. The New York City skyline was a tapestry of glittering promises from the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse Gabriella Blake shared with her fiancé Vincent Drake. Their life, much like the view, felt limitless, a perfect picture of modern success and romance. Gabriella, a talented, up-and-coming architect, had poured her soul into designing their shared space, a testament to their future. But her proudest creation was the small room down the hall, the one painted in soft, muted tones of sage and cream. The nursery. For weeks, a quiet, hopeful secret had been blooming inside her. This morning, two stark pink lines on a plastic stick had confirmed it. Joy, pure and effervescent, bubbled up inside her, so potent it felt like it could lift her off the ground. She clutched the test in her hand, her other hand instinctively resting on her still flat stomach. A baby. Their baby. She imagined Vincent's face when she told him. His charming, easy smile would break into a grin of genuine disbelief, then melt into the tender adoration she had fallen in love with. He was the golden heir to Drake Enterprises, a real estate behemoth that had shaped half the city's skyline. He was ambitious, driven, and she loved that about him. But she also loved the Vincent, who would kick off his $1,000 shoes, curl up on the couch with her, and whisper dreams that had nothing to do with stock prices or board meetings. The sound of the key in the door sent a jolt of anticipation through her. "Vincent!" She called out, her voice bright with suppressed excitement. He walked in looking every bit the prince of the city in his tailored Tom Ford suit. But his smile didn't reach his eyes. There was a tension in his shoulders she hadn't seen before, a strange, guarded look that made the joy in her chest flicker with uncertainty. "Gabriella," he said, his voice flat. He didn't come to kiss her as he usually did. He loosened his tie and walked over to the bar, pouring himself a scotch. "Straight. He never drank straight scotch before dinner. Is everything okay?" she asked. Her plan to joyfully announce her pregnancy suddenly feeling fragile. He took a long swallow of the amber liquid, his back to her. "We need to talk." Those 4 words were the harbingers of doom in any relationship. Gabriella's heart began to beat a nervous, heavy rhythm against her ribs. She tucked the pregnancy test into the pocket of her jeans. "Okay, talk." He finally turned to face her, his handsome features contorted into a mask of strained resolve. It isn't working anymore." The words hung in the air, so absurd, so completely out of place in their perfect life that she almost laughed. "What are you talking about, Vincent? We're getting married in 6 months. We were just looking at wedding venues last week. I thought everything was perfect." "I thought so too," he said, and the lie in his voice was like a physical slap. "But things have changed. My priorities have changed." A cold dread, sharp and icy, began to creep up her spine. What priorities? He wouldn't meet her gaze. He stared out at the city, at the buildings bearing his family's name. The company, Gabriella, the legacy. There's been an opportunity. A merger. She frowned, confused. A merger? What does a business deal have to do with us? He took a deep breath, the kind a man takes before he executes a particularly unpleasant task. The merger isn't just between companies, it's between families, the Rossis. The name hit her like a physical blow. Isabella Rossi, a socialite with a razor-sharp smile and an inheritance that rivaled the Drakes. Gabriella had always felt a chill around Isabella, a predatory glint in her eyes whenever she looked at Vincent at galas and charity events. Gabriella had dismissed it as harmless flirtation secure in Vincent's love. She had been a fool. Isabella, Gabriella whispered the name, tasting like poison. He finally looked at her, and the pity in his eyes was worse than any anger could have been. It's a strategic alliance, Gabriella. It secures the future of Drake Enterprises for the next 50 years. It's what my family needs. And what about what we need? She cried, her voice cracking. What about our future? The life we were building, the nursery down the hall. He flinched at the mention of the nursery. That was a dream. This is reality. I can't build a future on a dream when I have a duty to my family's empire. The carefully constructed fairy tale of her life was crumbling around her, turning to dust and ash. The man she loved was standing before her, talking about their life together, as if it were a failed business venture to be liquidated. So you're choosing her? You're choosing a business deal over me? The question was redundant. The answer was written all over his face. I'm making the hard choice, the one that ensures my family's legacy. He said, his voice taking on a colder, more resolute tone, the voice of Vincent Drake, CEO in training. Isabella understands the world we live in. She's part of it. The implication was clear. Gabriella was not. She was the architect, the artist, the girl from a middle-class background who had dared to dream she could be a queen in their kingdom of steel and glass. Tears were streaming down her face, now hot and angry. And what about love, Vincent? Does that factor into your strategic alliances at all? Love is a luxury, Gabriella. He said the words so cold, they burned. Duty is a necessity. Her hand flew from her pocket, and she threw the pregnancy test at him. It clattered against his expensive shoe. He looked down confused, then bent to pick it up. He stared at the 2 pink lines, his face draining of all color. For a single heart-stopping moment, Gabriella saw a flicker of the man she loved, a flash of shock, of awe, of something that might have been regret. Gabriella, is this... Yes. She choked out a raw, ragged sob tearing from her throat. Congratulations, Vincent. Your legacy is already secured. She expected him to rush to her, to hold her, to say this changed everything. Instead, he looked from the test to her, and a new kind of expression crossed his face. Not regret, not love, it was fear. Cold, calculating fear. He looked at her stomach as if it were not a miracle, but a complication, a problem to be managed. We can handle this, he said, his voice low and urgent. The company doctor is very discreet. We can arrange for a procedure. No one has to know. The cold dread that had been creeping up her spine now fully enveloped her heart, freezing it solid. He wasn't just leaving her. He wasn't just betraying her. He was trying to erase her, to erase their child, as if they were a clerical error in his grand life plan. In that moment, the love she had felt for him detubbed. It wasn't a slow, fading death. It was a violent, instantaneous execution. In its place, a different kind of fire began to burn. A cold, hard, diamond-bright rage. She lifted her chin, her tear-streaked face, now a mask of icy composure. Get out! Gabriella, be reasonable. Get out! She repeated, her voice low and dangerous, a tone he had never heard from her before. Get out of my apartment. Get out of my life, and you will never ever lay a hand on me or speak to me or my child again. He saw the finality in her eyes. The door to her heart, once wide open to him, was now bolted, barred, and sealed in ice. He gave a short, frustrated sigh, as if she were a stubborn employee, not the woman whose heart he had just pulverized. The Drake family lawyers will be in touch, he said, his voice, once again the cold, detached businessman's, to discuss a settlement. For your silence. He placed the pregnancy test on the marble countertop as if it were a piece of trash and walked out the door without a backward glance. Gabriella stood alone in the magnificent penthouse, the glittering skyline now mocking her with its empty promises. She looked at the nursery door, the room of dreams now a monument to her naivety. The tears had stopped. The shock was hardening into something else, something solid and unyielding in her core. He thought he could erase her. He thought he could buy her silence and discard her and their baby like a corporate write-off. He didn't know Gabriella Blake. He had just created an enemy. And in a city of predators and power players, he had made the fatal mistake of underestimating the fury of a woman with nothing left to lose. The weeks that followed were a blur of grey misery. The Drake family lawyers were as swift and brutal as Vincent had promised. A man in a suit with a face like a clenched fist delivered a thick envelope to her. It contained a non-disclosure agreement that read like a gag order and a check with enough zeros to seem insulting. It was hush money, a severance package for a terminated relationship. Gabriella tore the check in half and sent it back with a one-word note: no. The retaliation was immediate. Her access to the penthouse was revoked. Her belongings were unceremoniously packed into boxes and dumped in a storage unit, an itemized list sent to her email as if she were a departing tenant who had defaulted on rent. The locks were changed. Her name was scrubbed from the guest list, the security guards who had once greeted her with a warm, "Good morning, Ms. Blake," now looking through her as if she were a ghost. Vincent's engagement to Isabella Rossi was announced in Vogue, a lavish 10-page spread celebrating the merger of the century. There they were, smiling, radiant, clinking champagne glasses. Vincent's hand rested possessively on Isabella's waist, the exact spot where Gabriella's baby was quietly, defiantly growing. The world celebrated their union, oblivious to the wreckage they had left behind. Gabriella found refuge in a small rented room in a Brooklyn walk-up, the kind of place she thought she had left behind forever. The grandeur of the penthouse was replaced by peeling paint and the constant wail of sirens. She was broke, pregnant, and utterly alone. Her best friend Chloe, a fiery journalist who had never trusted Vincent, was her only lifeline, bringing groceries and righteous indignation in equal measure. "You have to fight him, Gabriella," Chloe insisted, pacing the tiny room. "Take him to court. Expose him for the soulless corporate ghoul he is. The press would have a field day. And what would that one do?" "Chloe," Gabriella asked, her voice weary. She was staring out the window at the brick wall of the adjacent building. "The Drakes own half the judges in this town. Their PR team would paint me as a gold-digging opportunist. They'd drag my name through the mud until there was nothing left. I'd be a scandal for a week and then forgotten, and I'd have put my baby through all of that for nothing." Protecting her child was now her singular focus. The rage was still there, a pilot light burning steadily in her chest, but it was banked by a fierce maternal instinct. She started looking for work, but her portfolio was tied up with a firm that did significant business with Drake Enterprises. Doors that had once been wide open were now politely but firmly shut. The Drake influence was long and suffocating. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, as she was leaving a fruitless job interview, her spirit at its lowest ebb, she saw a sleek black car idling by the curb. It was a Maybach, a silent behemoth of wealth and power that was utterly out of place on the gritty Brooklyn street. The rain slicked the pavement, turning the city into a watercolor of blurred lights and deep shadows. As she walked past the rear window, glided down. Inside sat a man she recognized instantly from the financial pages and society columns, Damien Blackwood. If Vincent Drake was the city's golden prince, Damien Blackwood was its dark king. His company, Blackwood Industries, was the only real rival to the Drake Empire. They were locked in a ruthless, decades-long battle for dominance in real estate, tech, and finance. Where the Drakes were old money, cultivating an image of dynastic prestige, Blackwood was a self-made force of nature, a shark who had devoured his competition with terrifying efficiency. He was notoriously private, rarely photographed, and rumored to be utterly ruthless. His face, sharp and angular, with intelligent, piercing dark eyes, was even more intimidating in person. "Miss Blake," he said. His voice was a low baritone, calm and devoid of inflection, yet it commanded attention. Gabriella froze her cheap umbrella, doing little to shield her from the wind-whipped rain. Why was Damien Blackwood, Vincent Drake's mortal enemy, speaking to her? A man in a driver's uniform quickly exited the car and opened the rear door for her. "Mr. Blackwood would like a word with you. Please get out of the rain." Every instinct screamed at her to run. This man was a predator, and she was wounded prey. But where could she run to? Back to her tiny room and her dwindling bank account. Curiosity and a strange sense of having nothing left to lose propelled her forward. She folded her umbrella and slid into the plush leather interior of the car. The door closed, shutting out the noise of the city, encasing them in a cocoon of silent luxury. The car smelled of rich leather and something clean and masculine like bergamot. Damien Blackwood regarded her with an unnerving stillness. His eyes missed nothing, taking in her rain-dampened coat, her worn-out portfolio case, and the defiant set of her jaw. "I won't waste your time, Blake." He began, his voice smooth as polished stone. "I am aware of your situation regarding Vincent Drake." Gabriella's spine stiffened. "My situation is my private business." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, gone as quickly as it appeared. "In this city, when the situation involves the heir to Drake Enterprises, it's rarely private for long. I make it my business to know my competitors' weaknesses, and Mr. Drake has just demonstrated a significant one." He wasn't talking about business, he was talking about her. "I'm not a weakness," she said, her voice sharp. "No, us." He agreed, his gaze intense. "You're a casualty, which makes you potentially a very powerful asset." Her mind raced, trying to decipher his angle. Did he want her to go to the press, to feed him inside information? "If you're looking for corporate secrets, you've come to the wrong person. I was his fiancée, not his business partner. I'm not interested in his business secrets. I'm interested in his public humiliation," Damien stated plainly. Vincent Drake and his mother Eleanor pride themselves on their immaculate public image, their family values, their legacy. A jilted, pregnant fiancée doesn't fit their narrative. "So you do want me to go to the press," she said, a bitter taste in her mouth. "You want to use me as a weapon against him?" "Not in the way you think," he corrected. "A press scandal is messy and fleeting. I have a more permanent solution in mind. A move so audacious it will permanently tarnish the Drake name and position me for a final decisive victory against them." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the silent car. Gabriella waited, her heart pounding, a slow, heavy beat. "I am proposing a merger of my own," Damien Blackwood said, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "I am proposing marriage." Gabriella stared at him, convinced she had misheard. "You're... What? A marriage between you and me? We will be married within the week. You will become Gabriella Blackwood. Your child, when he or she is born, will be a Blackwood heir, raised with my name and all the power and privilege that comes with it. You will want for nothing. Your child will want for nothing. You will be safe, protected, and elevated to a position of power that Isabella Rossi can only dream of." The sheer audacity of it left her breathless. It was insane. It was a plot from a soap opera. Why? Why on earth would you do that? "Because," he said, leaning forward slightly, his voice dropping to a confidential murmur, The only thing more shocking than Vincent Drake callously discarding his pregnant fiancée is for that same woman to reappear on the arm of his greatest enemy, for his child to be raised bearing my name. It's a checkmate, Ms. Blake. It attacks his pride, his legacy, and his public standing in one clean, devastating move. It will make him a laughingstock in the circles that matter most to him. She saw the cold, hard logic of it. It was a masterfully cruel move, a piece of corporate warfare played out on a personal human chessboard. She was to be the queen in his game, used to trap the opposing king. "And what do you get out of it, besides humiliating Vincent?" she asked, her mind trying to process the impossible offer. "I've already told you, it's a strategic victory. Beyond that, the terms are simple. It would be a marriage in name, only a contract. You would have your freedom, your own finances, your own life within the marriage. My only requirements are your public loyalty, and that you raise your child as a Blackwood. In return, I offer you sanctuary, and I offer you revenge." Revenge. The word hung between them, seductive and dangerous. He was offering her a gilded cage, but a cage that came with steel walls to protect her and her baby from the Drakes. He was offering her the one thing she craved more than anything, a way to make Vincent pay. Not with money, but with the one thing he truly valued, his pride. She thought of Vincent's cold eyes as he suggested she handle their baby. She thought of his mother, Eleanor, who had undoubtedly orchestrated this whole affair, a woman who saw people as pawns. Damien Blackwood was playing the same game, but at least he was honest about it. He wasn't pretending it was love. He was offering a transaction, a shield for her and a sword for him. "You have until tomorrow morning to decide," he said, as if sensing her internal battle. He handed her a simple black business card. It held only a name and a number. "My car will be waiting for you outside your building at 9 a.m. If you get in, I'll have my answer." With that, the driver opened her door. Gabriella stepped back out into the rain, clutching the small stiff card in her hand. The Maybach pulled away from the curb as silently as it had arrived, disappearing into the grey city. Gabriella stood on the sidewalk, rain soaking her hair, the world spinning around her. She had a choice. Remain a victim fighting for scraps in the shadows, or become a player in the grand ruthless game of the city's elite. She could be Gabriella Blake, the broken architect, or she could become Gabriella Blackwood, the wife of the most powerful man she had ever met, and the living embodiment of Vincent Drake's greatest regret. Her hand closed around the card, its sharp edges digging into her palm. For the first time in weeks, she felt not despair, but a spark of something dangerous and exhilarating, a spark of power. The next morning, at precisely 9 a.m., the black Maybach was waiting. Gabriella hadn't slept. She had spent the night pacing her tiny room, weighing the life of a victim against the life of a pawn. A pawn, she reasoned, at least stays on the board. Dressed in the best clothes she still owned, a simple but elegant black dress, she walked out of her building and didn't hesitate. She opened the car door herself and slid in. Damien Blackwood was sitting in the same spot, looking as impeccable and unreadable as the day before. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her decision. "Mr. Harrison will handle the details," he said, gesturing to the older, silver-haired man sitting opposite them. Harrison had the quiet, efficient air of someone who had managed kings and navigated crises without ever raising his voice. He slid a leather-bound folder across the polished table between the seats. "Mrs. Blackwood," he began, his voice a respectful murmur. "If you would." The name sent a strange jolt through her. It was already happening. She opened the folder. Inside was not one but two documents. The first was a prenuptial agreement, thicker than a novel. The second, much shorter, was a marriage license application. "The agreement is straightforward," Damien explained, his tone all business. "It outlines the terms of our arrangement. You will receive a substantial personal allowance, complete control over a portfolio of properties, and a discretionary fund. All expenses related to the child will be covered by a separate, unlimited trust. Your child will be legally named my heir, with full inheritance rights to a designated portion of the Blackwood estate, irrevocable upon their birth. Gabriella scanned the pages. The numbers were astronomical, the clauses ironclad. He was essentially making her and her unborn child independently staggeringly wealthy. In return, he continued, you will perform the public duties of my wife. Attend galas, host dinners, be seen on my arm. You will present a united front at all times. In private, we will lead separate lives. My penthouse has 2 master wings. You will occupy the east wing. I will remain in the west. Discretion is paramount. Loyalty is non-negotiable. And if I break the terms, she asked, looking up at him. The financial arrangements become void. You walk away with nothing, he stated without a trace of malice. It was a simple fact. But the child's trust is absolute. It cannot be touched, no matter what happens between us. My heir will be protected, and it was the ultimate security blanket. Even if she failed, her child would be safe. That was all that mattered. And, Vincent, she asked, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. You will have no contact with him. Any attempts he makes will be handled by my security and legal teams. You are not to engage. Your indifference will be a far more potent weapon than any argument. She took the pen Mr. Harrison offered her. Her hand was steady as she signed her name, Gabriella Blake, for the last time. She was signing away her old life, her old identity, for a future of gilded security and calculated revenge. The ceremony took place that afternoon at City Hall. It was a sterile, perfunctory affair. The only witnesses were Mr. Harrison and a steely-faced woman who was Damien's head of security. There were no flowers, no music, no loving gazes. When the justice of the peace said, "You may kiss the bride," Damien simply took her hand, his touch cool and firm, and brushed his lips against her knuckles. It was a gesture of ownership, not affection. But outside City Hall, the real ceremony began. A swarm of paparazzi tipped off by an anonymous source that was undoubtedly Mr. Harrison descended upon them like locusts. Flashes exploded, reporters shouted questions. Mr. Blackwood, is it true? Are you really married? What happened to her engagement to Vincent Drake? Damien was a master of the moment. He wrapped a protective arm around Gabriella, his body shielding her from the worst of the crush. He didn't smile, but he projected an aura of unassailable confidence and possession. He guided her toward the waiting Maybach, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. He didn't say a word, letting the images speak for themselves. The message was clear. She is mine now. The news broke online within minutes. Billionaire Damien Blackwood marries jilted fiancée of rival Vincent Drake. The story was a bombshell exploding across the city's elite social circles. Gabriella's phone, which had been silent for weeks, lit up with messages from people she hadn't heard from in years. But it was one message that made her heart stop. It was from Chloe. "Is this real? Call me the second you're not," with the Grim Reaper in a suit. A small smile touched Gabriella's lips. At least one thing in her life was still real. Their new home was Damien's penthouse, a sprawling duplex at the top of the Blackwood Tower that made her old place with Vincent look like a suburban starter home. It was a palace of glass chrome and charcoal grey marble, exquisitely decorated, but possessing the warmth of a modern art museum. Her wing, the East Wing, was larger than any apartment she had ever lived in. It had its own living room, a study, a massive bedroom, and a bathroom clad in floor-to-ceiling white marble. Her closet was already filled with a new wardrobe, curated by a personal shopper in her exact size. It was overwhelming, impersonal, and deeply lonely. That first evening, they ate dinner in a cavernous dining room, seated at opposite ends of a long, polished mahogany table. The silence was broken only by the clinking of silverware on porcelain. Is the East Wing to your satisfaction? Damien asked, his voice echoing slightly in the large room. It's more than satisfactory, she replied. Thank you. I've instructed my staff to procure anything you or the baby might need. My personal physician, Dr. Alistair Finch, is the best in the country. He'll be in touch to schedule a preliminary consultation. He was so efficient, so transactional. He was treating her pregnancy like a new acquisition that required the best possible maintenance. Damien, she said, testing his name. Can I ask you something? He raised an eyebrow, pausing with his wineglass halfway to his lips. You can. Why the Drakes? I know you're business rivals, but this feels personal. His expression became guarded, a shutter falling over his dark eyes. Everything in business is personal, Gabriella. The Drakes believe in legacy, in bloodlines, in the divine right of their name. They built their empire on the ruins of smaller, better men. I simply believe that all empires eventually fall. I intend to be the one holding the hammer when theirs does. There was a chilling finality in his tone, a hint of a much deeper, darker story. But he offered no more. The wall was back up. Later that night, Gabriella stood on the balcony of her wing overlooking the city. In the distance, she could see the glowing sign of the Drake Tower, Vincent's kingdom. She imagined the scene inside, the shock, the fury, the humiliation. Vincent's mother, Eleanor Drake, a woman as cold and hard as the diamonds she wore, would be apoplectic. Vincent, for his part, would be seething. His pride, his most fragile and essential asset, had been dealt a mortal blow. He had cast her out, and she had landed in his enemy's castle, not as a refugee, but as its new queen. A notification popped up on the new encrypted phone Mr. Harrison had given her. It was a link to a society blog sent without comment. The headline read, "The Bride Wore Revenge, Blackwood's Ultimate Power Play." The article was filled with pictures of them leaving City Hall. One photo stood out. It was a close-up of Damien's hand on her back, his thumb resting gently near her waist. To the world, it looked protective, almost tender. But Gabriella knew the truth. It was a brand. She was now a Blackwood. She placed a hand on her stomach where the faintest swell was beginning to show. "Well, little one," she whispered to the city lights, "it seems we're in the game now." She was no longer just a betrayed woman. She was the Blackwood bride, a symbol of defiance. It was a cold, lonely, and terrifying position, but it was infinitely better than being a victim. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of control over her own destiny. Life as Mrs. Blackwood was a carefully choreographed performance. Gabriella learned the steps quickly. There were charity board meetings where she sat opposite women who had once pitied her. Their expressions, now a mixture of awe and thinly veiled envy. There were quiet, lavish dinners where Damien's business associates spoke to her with a deference that bordered on fear. She was an extension of him, a symbol of his audacity. Her first major test came a month after the wedding at the annual museum gala, the pinnacle of New York's social calendar. It was the first time she would be in the same room as Vincent and Isabella. Damien's team prepared her for it like a general planning a campaign. A couturier was flown in from Paris. The dress was a masterpiece of deep emerald silk that clung to her curves and artfully draped over her now noticeable baby bump. A security detail briefed her on layouts and exit strategies. "You will not engage," Damien told her in the car on the way there, his voice low and firm. He was wearing a classic black tuxedo that made him look even more formidable. "You will be serene, untouchable. Your happiness is your weapon. Your indifference is your shield." When they entered the grand ballroom, a hush fell over the crowd. Every head turned. Gabriella felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, but she kept her gaze forward, her hand resting lightly on Damien's arm. He led them to their table, a prime spot near the stage, with the unhurried grace of a king entering his court. She spotted them across the room. Vincent looked pale, his smile tight and forced. Isabella, draped in a garish display of red sequins and diamonds, was staring at Gabriella with undisguised venom. The sight of Gabriella, radiant and pregnant on Damien Blackwood's arm, was clearly the ultimate insult. For hours, Gabriella played her part to perfection. She smiled, made polite conversation, and exuded an aura of calm contentment. Damien was a constant, solid presence by her side. He would place a hand on the small of her back when someone approached, or lean in to murmur, a dryly witty observation in her ear, creating an illusion of intimacy that was surprisingly convincing. The inevitable confrontation happened near the powder room. Gabriella had excused herself when Isabella cornered her by the ornate vanities. Well, Isabella sneered, her voice dripping with malice. The little charity case all dressed up. You know that emerald color is lovely, but it does make one look rather common. Gabriella met her reflection in the mirror, refusing to look directly at Isabella. It's a shame your dress didn't come with a personality to match, Isabella. Red is the color of passion, and all I see is desperation. Isabella's face tightened. You think you've won, don't you? Marrying that soulless monster. You're just a pawn in his game with Vincent. A piece of property he acquired to spite his rival. And what does that make you? Gabriella replied finally, turning to face her, her voice calm and even. The consolation prize. The woman a man married for her father's company. At least my monster is honest about the terms of our contract. Can you say the same about your husband? Before Isabella could retort, Vincent appeared, rushing to her side. Isabella, what's going on? He saw Gabriella, and his face was a complicated mess of anger, guilt, and something that looked painfully like longing. Gabriella, he said, his voice softer than he intended. You look, well. I am, she said, her tone cool and dismissive. It was the indifference Damien had prescribed, and it was devastatingly effective. She saw him flinch. Don't talk to her, Vincent, Isabella shrieked, her carefully constructed facade cracking. Can't you see what she's doing? Flaunting that thing in our faces. She gestured crudely towards Gabriella's stomach. A cold fire ignited in Gabriella's chest. Before she could speak, a low, dangerous voice cut through the air. I would choose your next words very carefully, Mrs. Drake. Damien was standing at the entrance to the lounge, his eyes like chips of ice. The temperature in the room seemed to drop by 20 degrees. He walked slowly toward them, every step measured and menacing. He didn't look at Vincent or Isabella. His gaze was fixed on Gabriella. Are you all right? He asked, his voice softening almost imperceptibly as he addressed her. She simply nodded, her throat tight. Damien's gaze then shifted to Isabella, and the coldness in his eyes was terrifying. My wife is not to be spoken to in that manner, ever. And as for the thing you so crudely referred to, he said, his hand moving to rest gently possessively on Gabriella's stomach. You are speaking of my heir. The next time you address my family, you will do so with the respect they are owed. Is that understood? Isabella was speechless, her face white with shock and fury. Vincent, the supposed titan of industry, looked like a schoolboy being dressed down by the principal. He stammered, Damien, this is a private matter. You made it my matter when you put my wife in this position. Damien cut him off, his voice lethally quiet. Leave, now. They scurried away, a humiliated retreat that the dozen or so onlookers would be gossiping about for months. The power play was complete. Damien turned back to Gabriella, his expression softening again. Let's go home. In the car, the silence was different. It wasn't the awkward, formal silence of their first few weeks. It was thick with unspoken emotion. Thank you, she said quietly. Protecting you is part of our agreement, he replied, but his voice lacked its usual businesslike tone. He has no right to cause you distress. A few weeks later, the reality of her pregnancy hit hard. A sudden sharp pain one afternoon sent a wave of panic through her. She clutched her stomach, dizzy and terrified. Ignoring the protocol of contacting Mr. Harrison, she did the only thing she could think of. She called Damien's personal number. He answered on the first ring. "Gabriella, something's wrong," she gasped out. "The baby. I have this pain." The line went silent for a fraction of a second. "Stay where you are. I'm on my way." She had expected him to dispatch Dr. Finch or Mr. Harrison. But 20 minutes later, it was Damien himself who burst into her wing. His tie loosened his face, pale, with a raw, undisguised fear she had never seen on him before. He didn't hesitate. He scooped her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing and carried her out to his waiting car, shouting orders at his staff. "Get Finch to the hospital. Clear a path. Now." At the hospital, he never left her side. He held her hand while the doctors ran tests, his grip firm and reassuring. He spoke to the medical staff with a clipped, urgent authority that got immediate results. The hours blurred together in a haze of fear and discomfort. It turned out to be a scare, a complication called round ligament pain, common in pregnancy, but terrifying nonetheless. The baby was fine, healthy and strong. When the doctor left, leaving them alone in the quiet private room, Gabriella finally let out the breath she'd been holding. She started to cry, silent tears of relief and exhaustion rolling down her cheeks. Damien sat on the edge of her bed. He didn't say anything. He just took a handkerchief from his pocket and gently wiped the tears from her face. His touch was hesitant, almost tentative, as if he were handling something impossibly fragile. "He's fine, Gabriella," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "The baby is fine." She looked at him, then at this cold, calculating man who had just torn his day apart and shown more raw panic and concern than Vincent ever had. He wasn't looking at her as an asset or a pawn. He was looking at her and at her bump with a fierce protectiveness that felt achingly real. "You were scared," she whispered. He looked away, staring out the window, composing himself. The mask of the ruthless businessman slid back into place, but not before she had seen the man behind it. "The Blackwood heir is a significant investment," he said, his voice regaining its usual cool detachment. "I was protecting my investment." But she knew it was a lie. She had seen it in his eyes. In that moment of terror, the lines of their contract had blurred. He wasn't just her protector by contract. In some strange, unexpected way, he was becoming her partner. And the child she was carrying was no longer just hers or the ghost of Vincent's. It was becoming theirs. The hospital scare was a catalyst, shattering the formal distance between them. The invisible walls separating the east and west wings of the penthouse crumbled. Damien began joining Gabriella for dinner nightly, the cavernous dining room feeling less like a boardroom and more like a shared space. Their conversations deepened, moving beyond polite inquiries into something more substantial. During one of these evenings, with the city lights glittering below, Gabriella found the courage to breach his formidable defenses. "Damien," she began, "you once said the Drakes built their empire on the ruins of better men. This fight is personal for you. I want to understand why." He was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable as he stared into the fireplace. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, heavy, with the weight of old grief. "My father's name was Alexander Blackwood," he said. "He was an innovator, an architect with a brilliant vision. He developed a new, sustainable building material that was poised to revolutionize the industry." Gabriella, the architect, leaned forward, captivated. "He was a creator, not a fighter." Damien continued, a bitter edge to his tone. "He partnered with Drake Enterprises to bring his work to market. Vincent's grandfather, Alistair Drake, promised him the world. Instead, he stole it. Through legal loopholes and financial strangulation, Drake pushed my father out, seized his patents, and launched the Drake Tower, using a diluted, cheaper version of my father's technology. It wasn't the money that broke him. It was the theft of his legacy. He died of a heart attack when I was 19. Everyone called it stress. I knew it was betrayal. The story hung in the air, raw and painful. This wasn't a business rivalry. It was a blood feud. His relentless ambition was forged in the fire of what the Drakes had done to his family. "I'm so sorry, Damien," Gabriella whispered, her heart aching for the boy, who had to channel his grief into a lifelong quest for justice. He gave a slight, sharp nod, accepting her sympathy without dwelling on it. In turn, she found herself opening up, telling him about her own dreams of compassionate architecture, of building spaces that nurtured communities. He listened with an intensity that made her feel truly seen. The next day, a full suite of state-of-the-art architectural software and drafting tools was installed in her study. The attached note was simple: "A mind like yours shouldn't be idle." Empowered, Gabriella began to work. She channeled her energy into designing a flagship project for the new Blackwood Foundation, a series of inner-city youth centers built on principles of sustainability, a quiet tribute to his father and community. She presented the plan to Damien, not as his wife, but as a professional colleague. He reviewed her blueprints with a keen, critical eye. "This is exceptional, Gabriella," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "It's not just a building, it's a statement. The foundation will fund it. You will lead the project." A sense of purpose entirely her own bloomed within her. She was earning not just his protection, but his respect. Their partnership was evolving, becoming an alliance of minds as well as circumstances. A new, softer intimacy grew between them. One evening, he found her in the newly finished nursery and hesitantly placed a hand on her stomach. As the baby kicked against his palm, his eyes widened and a rare, unguarded smile broke through his stern facade. In that moment, he was not a corporate raider, but simply a man awed by the life he had sworn to protect. When she went into labor, Damien was her anchor. He was by her side through every contraction, his strength, her support, his quiet encouragement, her focus. Vincent Drake was a ghost of a past life. The man who mattered was here fully present. Liam Blackwood was born at dawn with a healthy cry and a shock of dark hair. After the nurses placed the swaddled baby in Gabriella's arms, she looked at Damien. He stood by the window, looking utterly overwhelmed. "Would you like to hold your son?" she asked softly. He approached the bed with a reverence she'd never seen in him. As she gently passed the tiny bundle into his arms, Damien cradled him against his chest. He looked down at the infant who was supposed to be a tool for revenge, and his ironclad composure shattered. A single tear traced a path down his cheek. He had started this journey, seeking vengeance, but in the process, he had found a family. A few days later, they were home. An urgent call from security informed them that Vincent Drake was in the lobby, demanding to see the baby. Damien's jaw tightened, but he looked at Gabriella, leaving the decision to her. "No," she said, her voice clear and firm as she held Liam close. The rage she once felt for Vincent had been replaced by a protective, diamond-hard peace. "Tell him he lost that right a long time ago. Tell him to leave or my husband will have him removed for trespassing." My husband. The words felt true. They felt final. She realized then that her revenge was complete. It wasn't in Vincent's spiraling downfall, which she heard whispers of, but in her own quiet happiness. It was in watching Damien, the city's most ruthless man, gently rock their son to sleep. Their marriage, born from a cold contract, had been rewritten by shared vulnerability and unexpected love, becoming more real than either of them could have anticipated. The birth of Liam Blackwood transformed their alliance. For Damien, vengeance gave way to legacy. For Gabriella, the instinct to protect her son forged a new, unshakable strength. The war with the Drakes was no longer about the past. It was about securing a future safe from their toxic influence. Gabriella's purpose sharpened. While organizing her old digital files, she found an encrypted hard drive Vincent had once dismissively told her to hold on to, calling it old family business. Curiosity piqued, she took it to Damien. His tech team cracked it open within hours, revealing a digital Pandora's box. It was a confession in gigabytes, decades of the Drake's corruption, from illegal payoffs to fraudulent reports. Most damning of all, it contained the original unaltered partnership documents that proved the systematic theft of Alexander Blackwood's life's work. In his arrogance, he kept a playbook of his family's sins. Damien said, his voice a low growl as he stared at the screen. "Now it's their eulogy," Gabriella replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. Their retaliation was not a press leak, but a surgical strike. Damien's legal team discreetly delivered the evidence to federal investigators. As the first whispers of a formal investigation began, Damien launched a hostile takeover bid for the now vulnerable Drake Enterprises. Allies, including the Rossi family, abandoned the Drake's sinking ship. The news broke like a tidal wave. Drake Enterprises under investigation. The infallible dynasty was finished. The final confrontation was not in a boardroom, but in their home. Vincent appeared at the penthouse one evening, having slipped past security, a desperate ghost haunting a life he'd thrown away. He looked gaunt, his arrogance replaced by raw panic. "Gabriella, you have to stop him," he pleaded, his eyes wild. "My mother, the company, it's all gone. This is your fault." Gabriella stood before him, calm and resolute, holding Liam sleeping peacefully against her shoulder. "No, Vincent, this is your fault. Your family built a kingdom on lies. The foundation was always rotten. All we did was expose the truth." His gaze fell on Liam, a painful longing in his eyes. "He's my son. Please, Gabriella. I was a fool. I see that now. We can be a family. You, me, and our boy." The words that once would have shattered her were now meaningless. "A family?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. "You didn't want a family. You wanted to handle a complication. When I became inconvenient, you tried to throw me away." She looked down at her son, then back at the broken man before her. "The difference, Vincent, is that the man I am with now saw me at my most broken, and he didn't see an inconvenience. He saw a queen. Now, goodbye." With that final devastating dismissal, she turned her back on him. It was the last time she ever saw him. The Drake Empire was dismantled. Eleanor was indicted, and Vincent, disgraced and disinherited, vanished. Damien acquired the Drake Tower, and in a symbolic final move, slated it for demolition. In its place would rise the Alexander Blackwood Center for Innovation, with Gabriella as the lead architect. Months later, Gabriella stood on their balcony, the city lights twinkling below. Damien came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. They stood in the comfortable silence of a shared life, their son sleeping peacefully inside their world, finally at peace. "Our marriage of convenience," she began, turning in his arms to face him. "Yes," he prompted, his dark eyes soft with an emotion he no longer concealed. "It's become very inconvenient," she whispered, a smile touching her lips. "I seem to have fallen in love with my husband." A genuine smile, the one she'd come to cherish, spread across his face. "Then the inconvenience is mutual, Mrs. Blackwood," he murmured, before he lowered his head and kissed her. It was not a kiss of ownership or revenge, but one of profound love and a shared future. A new legacy, built not on the ashes of the past, but on the solid ground of a family forged in fire. From the depths of a soul-crushing betrayal, Gabriella Blake didn't just survive, she orchestrated a resurrection. She transformed her greatest pain into her ultimate power, proving that the best revenge isn't loud and explosive, but quiet, strategic, and deeply satisfying. She didn't just marry her ex-fiancé's enemy, she built a new life, a new legacy, and found a love more real and powerful than the fairy tale she thought she had lost. Her story is a testament to the incredible resilience of the human heart and a reminder that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what truly matters. If Gabriella's journey from heartbreak to triumph moved you, and if you believe in the power of rewriting your own story, then please show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs a story of strength, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories of justice, empowerment, and ultimate victory. Thank you for listening.